Hey, welcome back to another video. I'm Ivan Calderon, and today I'm gonna share with you 3 tips to get better at making beats. Okay, so as most of you know, over the course of the month of April, I set out a challenge for myself to create a beat every day, and I called it the Stuck at Home Beat Challenge since we're all kind of stuck at home due to the worldwide pandemic. The initial idea behind this challenge stemmed from the realization that I wasn't spending enough time creating beats, or really just music in general, for me. Recently, I've been spending a lot of time creating content for this channel, which takes up a lot of time, or creating music for other people, but not enough time was being spent on creating music for myself. So this was my own way to get back into the mix, no pun intended. When I first started the challenge, I literally had no plan for it other than to get me back into creating consistently, but as with most things in life, there is always something to learn. So then today I want to break down everything that I've learned by doing this challenge and specifically break down my 3 main takeaways that I believed helped make me a better music producer, helped me make better beats over the month of April, and ultimately how they can help you as well. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Okay, so the first lesson, the first tip is that whether we see it or not, creativity is in fact a muscle. If I'm being 100% honest with you, this is something that I've personally struggled with for as long as I've been making music, and I know it's a topic up for debate, but hear me out. Now, for the longest, I used to always wait to create until I was inspired, and while yes, that ultimately resulted in an easier time creating, those creations were few and far between simply because I was waiting for an external factor to dictate or drive my creative process. In other words, I was being reactive, not proactive. Over the course of this challenge, I made it a priority for myself to create a beat every morning as the first thing that I did when I came into the studio. Now, being completely honest, there were days where I wasn't feeling it at all, and in those times, I never forced it. I simply walked away and did something else. That's fine. But what I ultimately learned doing this challenge is that inspiration usually came after I made the decision to start creating, and what's even more surprising is that it got easier as the days went on. There were a lot of days where I would walk into the studio and not feel 100% inspired, but as I started to go through the motions, inspiration and flow took over, and the next thing I knew, I had a beat finished. By the last week of the challenge, I was so much into a rhythm that creating went back to being second nature, almost like muscle memory where everything happened naturally. And what was even more cool is that through this consistent creative immersion, I was even able to come up with new ways to improve my workflow. So then the first lesson that I got from this challenge, and my tip to you, is that creativity at the end of the day is in fact a muscle. And if you want to get better at making beats, or really just anything, you have to do it consistently. If you're not feeling it on some days, then that's totally fine. Out of the 28 days that this challenge took place, I only finished 18 beats, so I missed 10 days. But those were 10 days that I really just was not feeling it. Nonetheless, you do owe it to yourself to at least try every day and strengthen that creative muscle. All right, let's talk about another really big one, and that is overthinking. The second lesson and the second tip for you is that overthinking will ultimately kill any good idea. Now, I know I'm not alone with this, as it's probably one of the biggest obstacles we face as creative individuals, and one could even argue that it's the root cause for beat block. Too many times I sit down to create and work really hard on something that I enjoy, only to look back at it at the end and say, nah, this sucks. This even happens in the middle of a creative process as I'm trying to make a beat and get stuck deciding which kick drum pattern is the best. I know everyone is different, and for some people, creating multiple beats in one day is probably nothing, but I've never been one of those people. I like to have a workflow that gives me the freedom to create efficiently, to get an idea out as soon as I have it, but I don't rush it. What this ultimately meant was that creating and putting out a beat every day for a month was going to be an incredibly hard task for me, and I knew very early on that the only way I was going to come even close to finishing this was to just stop overthinking and go with the flow. I understand we all want to create amazing pieces of art, and that does take careful and deliberate decision making. However, what ends up happening most of the time is that we end up hiding behind our fear of being judged and rejected, and we mask that as perfectionism. What's worse is that after a while, you get so used to doing this that you never even end up putting out any music. So then, lesson number 2, tip number 2, is to stop overthinking and just create. Okay, the last lesson that I learned by doing this challenge is that you should always put out everything that you finish. This one kind of piggybacks off the last lesson, the last tip, but it was probably the single most important one that I learned. Simply put, if you finished a beat and you enjoyed making it, don't overthink it, just put it out. Trust me on this. Now, the reason you want to do this is twofold. Number one is that you'll get feedback. If the beat was great, then people will tell you. And if it wasn't so good, they'll either also tell you or you'll get less engagement. Either way, you'll now have a clearer roadmap as to how to improve. My advice is that whenever you put out anything, you also make sure to ask people to give you constructive criticism. People will, for the most part, always tell you if things are good, but often refrain from telling you if things are bad, maybe because they don't want to hurt your feelings, but ironically enough, this is the type of feedback you need to get better. Remember that progress only happens after you look back, but to do that, you have to have things to look back on. Put your beats out and get that feedback. The second reason you want to put out everything that you finish is because you never know who will like it and what opportunities that might bring. True story, towards the end of the Stuck at Home Beat Challenge, I was making this tropical pop type beat. I believe it was called Paradise, and I really enjoyed making it, but at the end, I looked back at it and I was like, this might be a little too cheesy. I was overthinking. I then took the beat to my fiance to get her opinion, and after she listened to it, she told me I was being hypercritical, that she really liked it and that I should put it out. By the way, shout out to supportive partners, because God knows this is already a super hard career to follow, so having a supportive partner is a blessing. Anyway, I posted the beat and it ended up getting really good reception, but what's even better is that a few days after I finished the challenge, I actually got hit up by a relatively well-known company who told me that they found me on Instagram, that they liked my beats and that they wanted to do business with me, and one of the beats they specifically told me they liked was one called Paradise. I'm still working out the details of this deal and nothing is concrete, so obviously I can't speak on it yet, but this is a great example as to why you should always put out everything that you finish, because you never know who's gonna like it and you never know what doors that might open. But okay, to summarize, if you wanna be a better producer, if you wanna become better at making beats, you have to, one, realize that creativity is a muscle that you have to consistently be flexing, so you have to create every day. Number two, you have to stop overthinking. And finally, please put out everything that you make, because you never know what could come from it. To make a long story short, create frequently and overthink less. That's how you progress. But that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this video was helpful to you. And if it was, please give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe if you're not already, but I will see you on the next one.